welcome to the JIGME KELSANG podcast. Um, each week, you'll hear fascinating conversations as well as stories from many professionals from a broad range of fields and experiences they've had. On today's episode, I have the great pleasure to chat with Ellen Petersen Haygood. Ellen, a director of marketing, banjo player, Patreon manager of the Petersens band. She has graciously joined me now to talk more about it. Hello and welcome, Ellen.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I mean, it's great to be with you and great to chat with you today. I mean, you've had a busy schedule. I know you guys just came off of the road,
Yes.
and I love to see the stories that you guys post on your Instagrams,
Mhm.
and it's cool. You guys go on coffee strolls, and then you talk about sort of small towns, and then you talk about loving to play shows in front of actual people because quarantine was so weird that we had to do everything virtually, and we're going to
Yes.
talk about that and the difficulties of having to record content from home and having to record shows, but which are not live usually, and during quarantine. And but before that, I want to really talk about um, how you sort of got into music because there's a lot of people who say that they get started at a young age, and then before they could even when they could start to talk, is when they first picked up how they got into music. But how did you sort of catapult yourself into that realm?
So my parents are both very musical. My dad grew up playing the piano and he also plays the saxophone and the guitar. My mom is very gifted at playing the trumpet and she has her master's in music education. Um, so we grew up always singing. Like we would go, my dad was in the Air Force. So if we ever wanted to see either sets of my grandparents, we were driving to West Virginia or we were driving to Missouri from wherever we were stationed in the military. And so we spent a lot of time in the car. We also loved road trips. And so we did like the big family road trip out west and then the East Coast. And so just anytime we were driving, we would watch TV a little bit, but mostly we were just singing. And they just had these tapes that we would sing along with. We were homeschooled. And so music was a class to us that was just like math or reading. It was just always a part of it. So you go take your music class lesson. And oftentimes my mom was the teacher of that class in the homeschool co-op. So it was always something that we were immersed with, but never something that we thought we would do professionally. It was just one of those like well-rounded skills that my dad would always talk about. I mean, music helped him in the military. It was something that would help him stand out a little bit. So maybe instead of having to do another duty, he would be like part of the band that would play and entertain the officers instead of having to do, something else. And music just always opened up doors. And so that's how we were kind of raised with that mentality, is that it was a great skill to have, just like being able to read well or do math. And so, but my dad, so we kind of just did music kind of as a hobby, served in church or whatever. And then when I was 12, we went to a bluegrass festival and my dad saw all these families playing the same style of music together, like grandparents, parents, kids, aunts, uncles, all sitting out by their campers around the bonfire and just singing and playing together. And he and my mom were very tired of driving one kid to a t-ball game over here and another kid to a dance class over there, because everything is so age segregated growing up because you're all at different levels, but music was the great unifier. So whether you're playing, a little lead solo and it's very simplified and just the melody, and then the next person that takes over, maybe they're a little more developed and they can take over, a little more, but you're all doing the same thing at the same time. And so that's why we became a bluegrass band. My dad just loved the family atmosphere of it. So he bought me a banjo that day at the festival. And we just started practicing together. And I mean, again, just purely as a hobby, but he quickly realized we would not practice unless we had people we had to play in front of, because we didn't want to, look dumb or silly on stage. So he started signing us up to do shows. and then we would actually practice. And again, never dreaming that we would do this professionally. It's just something fun as a family. And then we all went through college, graduated, minus the littlest sister who's still in college now. And then after college, I worked for a year with my degree, and people were still just asking us to play music. And so we were like, okay, it's now or never. If we don't give it a shot, we're always going to wonder. So I quit my job. I moved back to Branson, and we went full time in 2017.
I mean, that's a heck of a story, because it's really interesting to see how people merge into different areas and different
Mhm.
fields that they want to pursue, and it's interesting. But what I really found interesting more about yourself was when I was doing more of my research behind sort of how you sort of grew around music. Um, I tend to believe that, like, there wasn't really that spark in music at first, for yourself, because I think you talked about laboratory technician,
Mhm.
and I want to know more about that, because that's interesting. Was that the first thing that you want to pursue, aside from music, or was music the one that started it and then laboratory came after?
So when I was in junior high, I went on a medical missions trip to Ecuador, and my dad is a physician, and so he was kind of there helping out. And then my older sister Katie and I, we were both working in the pharmacy. So the doctor, it was my dad and a bunch of other physicians from our church. They would be like, okay, calcium to this person or this antibiotic to this person, and they were helping people. And I loved that medicine was a tool that they could go into a different country, and despite whether they could really speak the same language, they were helping people. And so I was like, I want to be a doctor. I want to help people, um in a way that would transcend even my own like personal community. And so I majored in chemistry in college, was taking the MCAT. And while I was studying for that, that's when I got my job as a laboratory technician. So I was really working towards going to medical school. But then obviously we kind of chose to do music instead. But the Lord, it's so cool what the Lord has done, because my heart and why I wanted to do medicine beyond like my wildest dreams, I've seen the Lord do through music. People from all over the world, different countries, different backgrounds. We have been able to help them through just sharing our songs. And so even though like I think the Lord placed that desire in my heart, and I was like, oh, well, obviously this has to be through medicine and being a doctor or a nurse. But the Lord was like, no, I'm going to do that with you through music. So it's been kind of like a full circle. And that really didn't happen until 2019. We started reaching people in different countries with our videos. So that was a crazy moment for us.
Mm-hmm. That's really fascinating, and you're just talking about your faith, and how important that plays into what you want to do moving forward and what
Mhm.
you've gotten to do in the past. Can you talk more about how your faith sort of led you on to a show like American Idol? Was that ever the direction where you felt that your faith in God was, you know, that was a sign that you needed to go on that show to showcase your talent?
No, and I totally should be better at like asking him before I do big things like that. But honestly, I didn't think anything would come out of American Idol. They were in Branson and I auditioned with a bunch of friends. But I definitely felt his presence during the process. I mean, I grew up in a Christian family, and then the college I went to was Christian. And so I had never, and even the Branson community is very conservative as a whole. And so being in LA for that amount of time was the first time I'd really been kind of like thrown into an element that I was not used to. And it was so interesting, um, just seeing how much and how easy it is. I mean, when there's cameras all over and everyone back home is making a big deal about you, and um, it's just easy to put your worth and your value on whether or not you're going to advance to the next round. Like if I get cut, nobody's going to care about, like that's just, they play into it. And the questions that the interviewers ask, like, tell us how this moment is the biggest moment of your entire life. And it was so like, I would sit there and I was like, my goodness, I really hope this is not the biggest moment of my life, because that is so sad. So I was like, this is a fun moment for me, but never once in that process was I like, this is it for Ellen Petersen, at the time. So it was very interesting, but just watching most of the people around me, because that's what the world tells them: be famous, make lots of money, like that's where your worth and your values found. But as a believer, it was just like the clearest I'd ever seen in the difference of what like the confidence and the hope is that you have in Christ versus letting the world tell you who and what you should be and whether or not you're worth their time. So that was like, I felt the Lord in the process, but I probably should have prayed a little bit before I auditioned, but I just kind of went for it.
I mean, no, I mean, I think it's important to trust your instincts. I think it's important to really stay grounded in those moments. But um, I want to talk more about the judges because I know the judges, they've had a change in judges for many, many years. And, when you were on there, it was Keith Urban, it was Harry Connick Jr., it was Jennifer Lopez.
Mhm.
And when you look back on that moment, that young Ellen Petersen, um, in that moment of American Idol, in that first audition, when you look back on that, what do you think of yourself now, and then what would you tell your younger self that was in that audition?
Oh goodness. I really did love those judges. They're great people. And you just, in moments like that, I think the biggest thing that I was just like, please don't let me look like a fool, because reality TV shows, they don't care whether you sound great or whether you sound bad. And so I was like mostly concerned that they would put some like dorky music behind one of my interviews and make me sound like a hillbilly or something. So I was very aware that like that could happen. And man, I just felt really close to the Lord through all of that. And looking back now, I can see how he provided for me. And so a lot of that was just like walking in blind faith, like, Lord, I feel like you're calling me to continue on in this process. And I'm just trusting that whether or not it works out, with a yes or a no, like you have it. And it's just cool. And I've had a lot of moments like that in my life where I'm like at a crossroads and I'm like, Lord, like this is like, I am walking out on here believing that this is what you have for me in this moment. And so it's fun looking back now and being like, it is what he had. And he did get you through. And like the outcome rarely is what I thought it would be, but it's beautiful and it's better, not in like, I mean, when I got cut from the show, it's one of the few times I've ever heard the Lord speak very audibly to me. And they said, you're not going to go on. They told me to ditch the family band and move to Nashville and be my own performing artist. And I just had no interest in doing that. So I was like, thank you so much. But I just felt the Lord say that he had something so much greater and better for me. And it's fun to see now, like what he meant through that. If I would have gone to Nashville and done my own thing, or if I would have proceeded on with the show and been my own singular artist, I would have missed out on this family and just the community, and to be able to be in the music industry with my family. I like, it's hard to do by yourself. And so I don't, and I think the Lord is still revealing, the good things that he has for me, but it's definitely not been, an easy road or a ton of money. But it's been really good. So just seeing the Lord's faithfulness and goodness through all that.
Mhm. And as you're talking about more on the heavily focused topic of your faith in God, and but I also want to reiterate something that I found really interesting, and while doing research again, preparing for this interview, I found out that during your stay on American Idol, um, your siblings Matt and Katie actually hopped on a flight to Hollywood
Yeah.
and to support you, and bring you tea, coffee, smoothies, and of course food. Who wouldn't bring
Mhm.
food? Um, Followed by also helping with choreography and vocal arrangements and much more.
Yeah.
That's gonna take a long time to explain, but can you sort of elaborate more on how their support meant the whole world to you during such a a very difficult time where it's so much pressure because you have to really show up every night and perform at your best, but sometimes you can't perform at your best in certain
Mhm.
nights, right? Can you talk to me more about how their encouragement sort of helped you through that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to feel like you're on your own in moments like that, and Katie and Matt were so great, and a lot most of the time, I wasn't allowed to be with them. They have all the candidates, isolated in rooms. That way they can call you in for your video interviews and tell you the next plan. So I didn't actually get to see them a bunch, but they just having them like in the audience, and I never knew where they were in the Orpheum Theater or whatever, but you go up to sing your song, you just know like at least there's two people out there that are rooting for me. And during group rounds are so stressful because you're just partnered with these people and you're all trying to make it through. And I don't know, I had a weird group experience, and they stayed up with me and like brought me smoothies and coffee during the night because you really are practicing all night. I think they get a lot more drama out of you when you're very sleep deprived on those shows. So we're all like exhausted, our voices are tired, we haven't slept, emotions are high. And then so after the rest of my group went to bed, Katie and Matt stayed up with me, and Katie helped me figure out some vocal runs to do with my voice to like help me stand out. And like Katie's always helped me with that from growing up. The reason I sang melody a lot more and she sang harmonies as kids is because I could never hear the harmonies. And so she was like, okay, if you do this with your voice, that'll sound cool. And so, and they're helping me like make sure my dance moves don't look too silly because I play the banjo, I do not dance. And so that was just really sweet. And then after the final round in Hollywood, you do your like solo sing with the band, and I'm walking off the stage and I have heels on or whatever, and my little brother Matt just walked up to the stairs and like held my hand as I like walked down, which was just like so sweet and gentleman. It was just like you're exhausted, you're at your end, and like you have just like the two greatest people out there rooting for you. And whether you make it or don't make it, there's still nothing's going to change there, which is also really comforting.
Hmm. And of course, it's so difficult and really unimaginably hard to be told that it's the end of the road. And but I think you kind of took that adversity as such more of as a motivator. And you talked about that they told you to ditch the family band, and I'm not saying this personally to the judges. I'm not trying to call them out on here, but you did touch on that where they told you that maybe it's a recommendation to move to Nashville and try to pursue a
Mm.
career there. Why did you feel that there was that importance where you felt that you need to stick with the family band and try to see and explore what they have before making any decisions like that?
I don't know if I ever even actually considered ditching the family band and moving to Nashville. Like they said it, but I had no interest in it. Um, yeah. So like the thought of going out on my own and trying to do that all by like that sounds awful. So like they said it, but it's like I don't know. That's just nothing that I was ever interested in.
I mean, I would understand that. I mean, I think that like it's cool. I think that I was just talking to I just had another uh, country sibling duo that just came on the show not too long ago, and they talked about sort of Nashville, but we didn't get much into it. But they talked about moving from South Florida to Nashville to pursue a career. Um, and they really talked at length of how it's so cool to be able to write songs with songwriters in Nashville because that's where you really, get your feet wet. That's where a lot of
Right.
people,
If
you
you're
know,
wanting to collaborate, that is the place.
exactly. And that's what I found very fascinating about different people that who want to explore different avenues. Um, but then I want to turn now to the family band because I feel this is the more fun part of the interview. Um, I mean, is it not the fun part of the interview?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like I think that like shying away from the depressing story of American Idol where it's like, it's so awkward to be able to, like actually before we get to the family band, I want to actually talk about this because I've always wanted to ask American Idol people this question.
Yeah.
when the people who interview you before you go on to perform whatever, and they ask you specific questions as they film something on TV, is it ever awkward to have those cameras around you and ask those types of questions to you?
Man, I just got so used to it. So at the beginning, maybe a little, but that's kind of like how I fell into doing all these interviews now, is I got so good at it through American Idol, just like being used to having cameras and people asking me questions, that afterwards, like I'm still doing it. So it was weird, but it's like a skill, just like playing an instrument. Yeah, you just, it's a level of comfort. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good analogy of what interviews are like. And for myself, graduating from college, being able to go into a program like radio broadcasting, sort of the reason why I wanted to do interviews with people. I had people who asked me that, do you want to go into doing more of the newsroom, doing the live hits of radio, whatever. I was like, nah, I think I really want to pursue podcasting because I feel there's important stories that people have to tell.
right.
And that's why I felt there's importance to bring you on, because I know that you have an important story to tell. And I always like to promote small town people,
I
because
think,
small town people are really interesting, but they also have something that not a lot of people have, and it's an experience. It's experience that not well, not many like myself. I don't really live in a small town, but I live in a small area. I'll say that, where you have this tight knit community where everybody knows everybody,
mhm.
and I felt like, and I don't want to get this wrong, but Branson, Missouri is sort of how much people? 11,000? I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
somewhere around there.
right? So can you talk more about Branson, Missouri as a town, and sort of how that experiences in that town shape you to who you are?
Yeah, Branson is fascinating. It is a small town, but at the same time, there's so many millions of visitors that come in, that during like the peak tourism seasons, you really don't see many of your local friends unless you're going to like church or something where you all gather. And it's just, it's the most unique place, because going to the grocery store, you always see people that you know. Um, but at the same time, it's a tourist destination. So like on my way to work, I passed by a replica of the Titanic and a gorilla on top of a building. It's just like a weird mix, but there's also like, it's a huge fishing destination. And so it's like very small town, rural as well. And then they love music, they love faith, they love, they're huge in patriotism and those values. And so they're able to like focus all those things super well, while still maintaining like a very small town feel for the locals who actually like live and do business here.
Hmm. And you just talked about values, and that brings us to the discussion of finally getting into the Petersens band conversation, where,
Yeah.
it's so fascinating, and I've always wondered about the instrumentation implementation, I would say, of the Petersens band, because you play the banjo, but then there's also other people in the family who play all different sorts of instruments.
Mhm.
Emmett, who plays more the dobro.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a funny story, and I don't want to like it's not anything to call you out on, but it was written on the bio that
Yeah.
apparently Emmett wanted to join the Petersens band.
Mhm.
And then I don't could you explain that story of how that actually happened, because I felt it was hilarious, but then I mean it's so classic. I just loved it.
Yeah, so our family, we went full time in 2017. And so we're still very new. None of us are making any money. We all have other jobs. And then I manage all of our social media. So I got a message on Facebook from Emmett Franz, and he said he was looking for some more shows locally in the area. He'd been touring and doing a lot of shows in LA and going on the road, and he just wanted to stay more local to be near his family. And so at the time, we weren't even making money. So the thought of like having to pay someone else, I mean, we would have had to pay him out of our own pocket. And so I said no, but thanks. If we ever need an extra musician, I'll let you know. So a couple months later, Julianne was going to switch and be our full-time mandolin player. So she went to kind of like a workshop summer camp to kind of work on her mandolin skills, and my mom went with her. And so all of a sudden we were missing two of our instrumentalists. And so Julianne actually had the idea, like, why don't you reach back out to Emmett and he can help fill in on some of those parts. And so we did. And when he played with us, it was just magic. Like, we had never sounded like, we didn't even know we were missing whatever it was that he brought to our group. And so anytime we actually had a show that was paying us any sort of money at the time, we were like, okay, let's use that money and let's hire Emmett. And so that's kind of what we did. So we couldn't afford to have him full time because we just weren't making any money. And so he did that in 2017, just any show we could hire him for, he came in. And then in 2018, he went full time with us.
I mean, that's a hell of a story, because it's so amazing the way that I can really like understand the stories. And I think that like it's so fascinating, and I'll use fascinating again, because the whole background of the Petersens band is like something that like you just want to bottle it up in like a jar and then just keep it for the rest of your life, because
Oh.
it's the most amazing thing. And so to wrap up this interview, I want to talk more about, um, you know, we touched on the Petersens band, but then can you talk to me more about how you felt the importance of having that respect and strong relationship with one another sort of really harmonizes the group and keeps the group a little bit grounded, so to speak. So can you touch more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love my siblings, and if they ever, felt led to do something else, I would cheer just as hard for them in whatever area of life it is, if it wasn't with our music. It's fun that we still do enjoy getting to work together and be friends with each other, and spend Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, like all the stuff, all the messy stuff that comes with family, because we are by no means perfect. We have our own things. Man, it's a camaraderie. We've been in the trenches together. We've been just through some crazy experiences that no one else really will understand. And so to still come out of that and just truly love them and want the best for them. And I know they would say the exact same thing about me. It's just like a true joy to still be in this spot. And I know not everyone has that relationship with their siblings or even has siblings. And so it's been fun. I mean, we had no idea people would be interested in our family and like our sibling dynamics, but there are a lot of people without siblings and they like laughing at the dumb little pranks my brother pulls on us. Or, my poor brother did grow up with three sisters, so he went through his fair share of trauma with that, his upbringing. But it's just really sweet. And so, yeah, I don't even know how else to describe it. It's just, we're incredibly grateful. And the other thing too, if we ever did get to a point where the band was interfering with our sibling relationships, we would end the band so fast, because I want to come out of this with stronger relationships with my brother and sisters. And Emmett even in that too, because he feels just like one of us. So if the music or the business ever did become too much, like, it is definitely the family first. But thankfully, we've all still enjoy working with each other, which is fun.
Hmm. Um, and so as we're wrapping up things, you guys recently went to the Grand Ole Opry.
We did.
Um, was that your first time there?
Yeah, we'd never been, like, I'd never walked in the building. So it was really fun.
I mean, you got to really be in the audience to see Ben Rector, like his Grand
Yeah.
Ole Opry debut. Can you
Yeah.
talk to me more about being in the audience and seeing sort of like a fellow friend of yours sort of have his proud moment where you sit there and you see that he's so accomplished now, and have a full circle moment of when
Yeah.
he started to now see him on the Grand Ole Opry stage.
For sure. We first met Ben Rector. I say met, he has no idea who we are, but he came to our little college in Branson, Missouri, College of the Ozarks, when nobody knew who he was. And he played a show and we were just hooked. And I think that was like 2010. And so we loved his music and we have just felt like, I think we've seen him on every single one of his tours that he's ever done. And so when we found out we were going to be in Nashville when he was going to make his Grand Ole Opry debut, we just had to go. And so it is fun just seeing someone grow and develop as an artist, change music styles. Yeah, and then Cody Fry, his someone in his band was on American Idol with me. And so I did become friends with him, and he's also super successful on TikTok. If you guys like classical symphony music, you will love. I definitely recommend checking out Cody Fry. And so it's just been cool to see like both of those artists grow and develop to just like a huge level.
Mm-hmm. And my last two questions for you, and my second last question right now is, I've asked the country sibling duo about this too, and I really want your recommendations because, so I'll ask this now. In Branson, Missouri, give me your top five most recommended eateries.
Mm. Okay, Downing Street Poorhouse is a great burger. If you want an atmosphere experience, you have to go to Top of the Rock. There's some good local places too. If you like sushi, there's Momo's. There's a place down by the landing called Level 2. I mean, there's a lot of really fun. Billy Gale's has massive pancakes. So there's a lot of really fun different spots you can go eat at.
Okay, and my last question is, what could the listeners and viewers, what could you tell the listeners, viewers, and fans, what could they expect from you guys down the road?
We're just gonna keep playing music. You know, I think we're working hard on an album that we're about to release that just kind of reminded us of how fun it is to sing songs around a campfire. So these are some songs that we've enjoyed doing that with. So new music for sure. Still doing lots of YouTube videos. Julianne is moving to England for a semester, so there will be a slight pause on Julianne content. But we love the sweet spot of performing live in Branson, hanging out with our Patreon community, and posting music on YouTube. And so we're just going to keep doing those things.
Mm-hmm. And so thank you so much, Ellen, for taking your time out to talk with me today. I had a marvelous time, and congratulations on all the success your family band is having. And I look forward to seeing and listening to your future projects. To the listeners who made it this far on the episode, thanks so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Director of Marketing and Banjo Player, Patreon Manager of the Petersens Band, Ellen Petersen Haygood. You can find her and the family band on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. For further information about them, you can visit petersenband.com. If you'd like to help spread the word about my podcast, please do feel free to share with others, post about it on social media. Any form of support is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. I've been your host, JIGME KELSANG. See you in the next episode.